Hi, I'm going to demonstrate building a syntax highlighter using Edo. On the right hand side we have a syntax that's of a language that really doesn't exist, it's just there for demonstration purposes. So let me run through the user interface. On the left hand side we have the editor window. On the right hand side we have several different windows. This is the debugging window, and the debugging is split into the source text, which is not highlighted, and the highlighted version of the same text. Then the other tabs are grammar definitions in various different formats. So ACE is the online ACE editor. This allows us to syntax highlight on the web. Atom is a TextMate type syntax highlighter. But I think it's formatted in CoffeeScript. I think that's the case. Pigments is an open source Linuxy syntax highlighter. Rouge is much of the same thing. Sublime 2 is really TextMate in plist format, and Sublime 3 is a new the new version of Sublime, which has additional syntax highlighting features. The one definition on the left hand side here can produce all of these outputs, so we don't have to write syntax highlighters for each individual target. And interestingly, Sublime 2 seems to be the de facto standard, which is the TextMate syntax highlighting format, and that can be used in Sublime 2, obviously. I think it can be used for Sublime 3 also. It can also be used in Visual Studio Code, and I think it can be imported into Atom, which is the GitHub editor too. So we spent far too much time just explaining what these tabs are, so let's see something. So we go back to the debug tab, and this is really where we spend most of the time. This is really only interesting when we're testing the finished product or the near finished product. This is interesting as well. This tells us that this particular window here is stale. So as we edit, this window becomes stale. So this responds to whatever's been edited over here. So to get started, we press Ctrl and space, and we get a template here. And there are some headers here which try to help you. It's not particularly easy in, well, there we are, some more columns. So let's get rid of these headers. Normally you would like to keep them because it allows the user to visually see where the different sections begin and end. So this is the name of the language, so let's just call this my sample. And file extension for my sample language is my sample. And then we have a main context, which is the syntax highlighting context that we're entering into. But before we do this, let's create a scope. A scope is, you can think of it like a style. So a bank of styles that can be referenced from other places. So quite often there are areas of text with a particular style, and if you want to change that style throughout the code, it's better to reference a bank where that style is stored. Therefore you don't have to go through the code and edit it in maybe 100 different places. Now we're running the dark theme, so the dark theme foreground color, let's make this light green. We can have any RGB color here. It supports RGB patterns as well. And then make this italic true. And all of that happens with Control Space. So once we enter this section, we can press Control Space and get access to a lot of other properties. But those are the two that are really quite useful at this stage. And let's implement a comment. Create a pattern. So inside here it's context sensitive. I can create a pattern. Pattern's the most commonly used item. So we select pattern, and this is a regular expression. So let's say we want a comment to start with 2 forward slashes, and then anything after the 2 forward slashes, and we want to capture that as a comment. Now these capture groups, there can be multiple capture groups associated with these patterns. So if we had 2 sets of brackets here, and let's say A, it would say that we've got a mismatch between the regular expression pattern groups and the capture groups here. So we could do another comment here. Oops. But we don't want that. So now if we save that with Control S, or we can hit the icon. So now you can see that it's picked up the comment. So this is processing on a line-by-line basis, and that's not just something that I decided, it's the lowest common denominator. I think Pigments processes on a per document basis, but TextMate tends to process on a per line basis. But this works across all exporters because it's using the lowest common denominator. So the end of line character here will naturally terminate. We don't need to supply that. So what else do we need? I'm going to fill in some scopes now that we're going to use elsewhere. So we're going to have keyword, and keyword will be cyan. Numeric will be gold. Punctuation is going to be red 2. Text is going to be brown, which isn't a particularly nice color, but just so that we can see it. Illegal, and illegal is going to be, the foreground color is going to be white, and the background color is going to be red. Now we have a few warnings here that these are orphan scopes, so they're not referenced anywhere else in the document. So that gives us some visual indication that there are some problems in this document, and they're not fatal problems. That's why they're yellow and not red, but it alerts us to the fact that we're over defining versus what we're actually using. And before we start here, I'm going to switch on TextMate compatibility mode. And I can demonstrate something at this stage, just very rudimentary. We have this rendering of the syntax highlighter as it's executing over the text, but we also have the exporters now have been generated. So this is what the ACE exporter looks like. This is what the Atom exporter looks like. Pigments exporter. The Rouge exporter. Sublime 2, which is plist, which is extremely wordy. I mean, look at this. You really wouldn't want to edit this manually. Sublime 3, which is much better, but unfortunately it seems to be restricted to Sublime 3. So Visual Studio Code will still take something in this format. Okay, so let's get back to building out this language. So now we're going to add some keywords, and the order is important here because the first evaluated matched pattern will be selected, and then it will go back to its outer scope unless it's running in the root scope, in which case it will just go back to the root scope. This should be familiar if you're at all familiar with the way that TextMate grammars work. So if you're not familiar with regular expressions, this video probably isn't for you. So I'm going to say that this needs to be not on a word boundary. Start with an alphanumeric, and then have an optional, one or more optional characters after the alphanumeric, and this is going to be a keyword. So that's a match pattern, and that match pattern will be evaluated before the comment match pattern. So if we save, nothing's happened here because we haven't saved, but you can see this say stale. Now if I press Ctrl S, now it's fresh, and all of a sudden we have the keywords are highlighted here. They're highlighted in this kind of cyan color. So now let's highlight some numbers. So some numbers, again, use the word boundary condition, and one or more decimal, and let's call this numeric. We don't think about the actual style itself in this section. The style is defined somewhere entirely different. So now you can see the numbers have become this gold color. You can also see that the multi-line comment is not working because it's matching some of these as keywords, which is bad. We don't want that. So let's build a multi-line comment, and this one is more complex because a multi-line comment is an inner grouping. So we're entering a new parse state. So when we're inside that state, we don't want to pick up something from the root, from the root context. So we're entering a new context. The context starts with 2 characters, which is forward slash asterisk, and then asterisk. I can't say it properly. Star, forward slash star, and it ends in star forward slash. And anything between there is parsed in a completely different scope. So the way that we traditionally do this in text-mate grammars is quite wordy, but there's a little bit of a shorthand we can use here. So we can use this structure called an inline push, which pushes an anonymous context onto the stack. And we need this to start with a forward slash, and a forward slash doesn't need to be escaped, but a star does need to be escaped. So that's how we start out of this scope, and that would be a comment. And then an inline push requires a pop as the first item in an inline push. So if it can match the pop, it will always try to match the pop first, and we do the opposite. So this will be an escaped star, and then a forward slash will be the pop, and that will also be a comment. So we have entered a scope, so we've entered a context, and within that context we've marked the beginning characters and the end characters, but now we can define rules in this scope, or we can define a default scope, and the default scope will be everything until we reach the pop. So this will also be comment, and there we have it. We have this is a multi-line comment, and this is a single line comment. So now the multi-line comment is entirely colored green, and the items within that scope are not going to be matched as keywords because there is no keyword matching within this scope. The editor itself applies the rules. So if we take out this default scope, it tells us that we need it. Okay, so what are we going to work on now? So let's work on matched braced brackets. So this is another inline push. This is punctuation, and the pop will be a matching brace, and this will also be punctuation, and it's going to complain about the default scope again. But instead of providing a default scope, what we're actually going to do is provide another rule which will be matched after the pop. So we're going to include a scope that we've defined already. In this case, we're going to include the main scope. So when we go inside these brackets, we're back in the main scope, but now we're one level down. So save that, and you can see that it's matched these brackets. So what happens if I create another bracket here? Now this one isn't syntax highlighted, and we can do better than that. We can. This is something that can't be matched, so we want to highlight things that can't be matched. So add another pattern, and this is anything that hasn't been matched before that's not a white space. And we only want to match one character at a time, because otherwise it will be too greedy and we won't be able to correct course. So this will be an illegal. And it's important that illegals are matched last, because this is a kind of, well, it's a greedy statement, one character at a time. So we certainly don't want to consume illegals unless everything else has been tried. So illegals are only defined in this context, but we can put them in other contexts too. So if I save that, now what happens is everything that's not expected is highlighted. Everything that can't be matched in this main context is highlighted. So I'm going to comment that out for now. So everything that's not matched has the default style, which just tends to be white text if running a dark theme. So what else do we have? Well, we're going to have another inline push here for what appears to be something like a function call. My apologies for my voice, it's the end of the day. So this is another inline push. So anything that starts and ends with particular marker characters are inline pushes. So we always need, everything needs to be matched inside groups. So regular expressions don't require this, but the way that ERO works is that it does require it. Everything needs to be assigned to a numbered group. So this is how we start, and that is punctuation. And we need a pop again. And the pop will be the opposite. So this will be punctuation again. Just clearing up some of these spaces. These spaces are added for convenience if you want to add something in between the suggestions, but usually I clean them up pretty regularly. And now it's complaining about default scope, but we don't actually want default scope inside here because there isn't a uniform style between here. There could be, but we want to have a different style per item within this function call. Now, I think we need to match numerics, but we already defined a numeric rule up here, and I don't want to repeat the rule. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a context and put this into the numeric context, and we can reference that context from here. So inside here I can do the same thing. So I can reference a numeric, and the numeric is there, and I think I want punctuation as well. So I want to match commas as punctuation. There we have it. In the main scope we're not matching semicolon as punctuation, so let's do that. Now I don't know actually what the rules of this language are. It's a sample piece of text, it's not an actual language. So we're in the main scope now, so let's add a pattern for matching random punctuation. So there we are, we've covered the semicolons now. We appear to have something missing, quoted text. So quoted text again is inline push, and this will be punctuation, and we're going to have a pop. Pop is the same character, ends in punctuation, but I think this time we're going to have a default scope. If we have escape characters in here and various other things, we need to be more elaborate, but we'll just use the default scope here. So the default scope will be text. So there we have it. Now I think that's quite complete, but we're not referencing the illegal. No, I'm not sure why text. There shouldn't be a warning here for text, so I'll investigate that. But illegal was highlighted because of this. Ah, yeah. So there must be a bug when I'm referencing it from default scope, but I'll fix that bug, no problem. So now we've got exactly what we want, I think. We have this redundant brace being highlighted, so we have brace level matching. And we have most of the observable grammar rules being implemented by this language definition file. We can add a UUID in there. Now, I don't generate that myself, so you have to copy and paste that in from somewhere else. And there are some other folding options that are inside here, and default scope and various other things. But that's mostly it. I should show you the. Oh, actually, there's a few features. So let's create some inner groups, and so we're inside one group, one set of bracy brackets, two sets of bracy brackets, 3, 4, I think we're 4 levels down. So if we hover over this, you can see the stack that we're in. We're in main, and then main rule 2, main rule 2, main rule 2. So the stack size is 4 there, and it's telling us what it's matching. So this is quite handy for debugging. You can see how it's matching various things. Now, what I didn't do is put in some debug level information, and normally it's good to rationalize this type of thing. So if I make this into multi-line comment, where are the comments? Put it down here. So now we can see that we're in the lexical state of multi-line comment. And this isn't perfect, but it's good enough to debug. You can see where the stack is going wrong. Now obviously if I put a few more brackets in here, you know, it's not matching properly because it's run out. It's run out of its stack. So that's the first thing I want to demonstrate, and the other thing that I want to demonstrate is just to give you an idea of how this works in reality. Now in reality, all of these different syntax highlighting systems have different ways of marking the code. So ACE uses particular types of rules, Atom uses other types of rules which actually join together with TextMate. So Atom, Sublime, and Sublime 3 use much of a muchness, but Pigments, Rouge, and ACE use different types of markers. So if we have a look at ACE, so we're matching everything properly, but you can see that the everything's going into this text token because nothing has been defined. It's not actually defining the types, it's not marking the types as a particular type of token. So let's change that, make the ACE scope comment. So now multi-line comment is the comment type token, and keyword, let's have a look at ACE scope, it's keyword. So now the keyword is marked here. Now this is a bit of a whack-a-mole problem. The more scopes that you define, the more implementation scopes you have to define to have a complete set. Now you need a complete set, otherwise what you'll have is you'll have some syntax highlighting that actually won't be styled in particular systems. So ACE won't syntax highlight comments unless you put a comment rule in here for ACE. So that's where this ... thing comes in at the end. So you can, so now I've really got to fill out this matrix. So for ACE I've put in the comment and the keyword. So for numeric I can make that whatever, a constant. I can choose the one that fits best. Constant numeric, that looks good. So now I have that as constant numeric. But let's say I put this constant numeric for punctuation as well. Oops. Now I've got some ambiguity. So even though I've technically assigned these, it knows that I've got a conflict. So punctuation, what is punctuation? Oh, there, punctuation. Just going to choose the general one. And in legal, invalid. And now that's a lie because of obviously this bug here is not picking up when it's being referenced as a default scope. But normally I'd need to name this. But if that was true, that would be a valid message. So that's down to a minor bug, but that bug will be fixed. So we've resolved this for ACE, other than text, which we will actually assign because it's lying to us. So text, great. So now we're greenlit, even though we have some fake error message here. So we can do the same thing with Sublime as well, and Sublime is really text-mate. So Sublime comment, Sublime keyword. They're very similar, ACE and Sublime, but not 100% similar. Numeric. Yeah, so far they're exactly the same. Punctuation. Sublime text. Invalid. So yeah, these are all 100% the same. But I don't think they're actually 100% the same. And then finally we can do pigments and rouge, but I'm not going to show pigments and rouge. You can see how it's working. No, actually I will. Just so you can see the green. Pigments comment. Now this is different, obviously. So it's using some capitalization there. This is a number, not a numeric. It's punctuation. Oops. Pigments. Punctuation. And pigments text. Is it string? Ah, string. Okay. And oh, so I've used string twice. So I don't want to use string twice. So I used string for illegal. Oh no, I haven't defined illegal. Is it error? I can. Alright, I'm going to choose generic.error. I'm not sure it's the right one, but there we go. So now I've fully kitted out these scopes so that when they're emitting to these various formats, we can be sure that there are no mutually exclusive styles that are defined. If there are, overlaps on these styles, then they'll be red, as you've seen before. So if I, again, just to highlight that, if I make the pigment scope here a comment, there we have incomplete or ambiguous scope coverage because these two are conflicting. So they'll be the same color even though they're completely different concerns. Done. Now obviously these can be referenced from different concerns in the grammar itself, but the scopes shouldn't overlap on styles. So now if we look at it, it's got the right combination of styles for ACE, the right combination of styles for Atom, the right combination of styles for Pigments. I really do like the way that Pigments defines things. It's a lot less wordy. Rouge is quite pretty. Sublime 2, which is hideous. TextMate, it's completely unreadable. You wouldn't want to do this on a large language by hand. Sublime 3, which is quite pretty. 85 lines for Sublime 3, but 59 lines for Pigments. Sublime 2 is a beast, and 264 lines. Now the theming is outside the scope of the tool, so when we're defining colors here, it really is just for the purpose of debugging, or when you're building and when you're playing with how you want to color in your language. You can play with these colors, but these colors don't make it into these files. These files are defining the language to go into particular, assigning particular system styles to each grammatical element. So this is punctuation, 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 and each one of these tools has their own theming engine. So this one file could be used for dozens of different ways to color in the text. So that's why, even though you define colors here, it's just for the debugger. It's just so that you have a representation of how things are going to look and how things are going to work.